Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 106 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is The Diagnostic Dog's Breakfast, an interview with Olivia Nicholas. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Matt, today we have another international guest, a guest from Australia. And I love interviewing folks from other countries, especially countries like Australia, where, of course, they have an official policy that Lyme disease does not exist. But I also enjoy doing these interviews because we get to learn more about other cultures and how they would describe the challenges that people with Lyme disease face. And we don't have a phrase like a dog's breakfast the way they do in Australia, which means, of course, not in order or a shambles or, it's sort of a little bit of everything. And I thought that would be a really good way of describing Olivia's experience based on the interview we did with her.
Rich, one of the things that really stood out for me for Olivia was that she was sick for over 10 years, her entire childhood with Lyme disease. She also got reinfected again a second time during this 10-year window, and she exhibited all of the classic Lyme-related symptoms, like she had Hashimoto's, autoimmune problems, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and even toxic mold syndrome, but it still took her over 10 years to get a proper Lyme disease diagnosis.
So, Matt, I do think a diagnostic dog's breakfast is a proper way of describing this, and we appreciate our friends from Australia from having a saying or a quote that would be consistent with what we've seen from many other Lyme disease patients. So without further ado, Matt, I want to introduce to our audience, Olivia Nicholas. Hi, Olivia, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And we're blessed to have you. So, Olivia, can you share with our listeners where you are calling in from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Australia. I'm Western Australia, and I live in Perth.
And Olivia, are you currently employed?
Not at the moment. I'm a stay-at-home mum.
Okay, and so let's talk about your family situation. I understand that you are a mom of a small child.
Yep. So I have a 2-year-old boy.
And you're a full-time mom for a 2-year-old son.
Yeah.
And prior to having that calling, what did you do?
I did all sorts of things since I left school. I worked in admin for a little while, and then I studied personal training. I wanted to be a personal trainer for a little while, and then I decided to actually change and become a regional flight attendant, which was really out of the blue. So yeah, I did that for about a year, and then I had to stop that because I started getting ear aches, and yeah, I just couldn't fly anymore. So after that, I went into admin in real estate, and then I fell pregnant. So yeah.
So Olivia, what is the educational system in Australia, and how much of it did you complete?
I completed all of the school system, so we do up to year 12. Yeah, and I graduated year 12. I didn't go to university. I just studied while I was in school. I studied nursing while I was at school, and then I studied personal training once I'd left, and I did a certificate in business as well.
Now, did you spend most of your life in Perth in Western Australia?
Most of my life, yes. I was born in Victoria, which people probably know better than Western Australia. It's on the eastern side of Australia. I spent 5 years there, and then I travelled back and forward probably twice a year to see my dad because he lived there. And I lived here with my mum and my sister. And other than that, I've only lived in Perth.
Could you describe what your childhood was like as a child in Perth in Western Australia?
Yeah, well, it's pretty sunny here, so we spend a lot of time outside. I don't know if I love sports, but my mum was very competitive, put me into a lot of sports, pretty much tried everything. So I was pretty active as a kid. Yeah.
Now, as an active, outdoorsy kind of kid, did anyone ever give you any information or training on ticks and tick diseases?
Definitely not. It is not something I had any idea about. Yeah, definitely not.
So were you aware of ticks, and do you recall ever having been bitten by a tick?
I wasn't aware of ticks. I honestly thought that ticks were the same thing as leeches. That's how much we don't get taught about them over here. I wouldn't have known what to do if I got bitten by a tick. Definitely not.
So let's talk about your journey as a 13-year-old. Can you share with our listeners what happened to you when you were 13 in your tick disease journey?
Yeah. So, yeah, it wasn't until I was 13. Oh, well, I still didn't know about Lyme disease or ticks or anything when I was 13. But yeah, looking back on my journey, I think that was the time that I was bitten by a tick. I had all the symptoms of an initial like tick bite, I which is now referred to as, I think that's rickettsia. I had the rashes down my legs. I had the bite on the back of my calf with the bullseye rash. I had the lumps under my arms, and I had a fever with nausea and headaches and everything when I was visiting my sister in Cairns. But yeah, it's only till now that I'm kind of linking that all together. So, yeah.
So just so that I can clarify some of that for our listeners. So you were approximately 13 years old, and you had some kind of a bug bite, which you recall resulting in you having a bullseye rash.
Yes, and at the time I wasn't aware it was a bug bite. The doctors told me that it was an infected boil, but it was something I'd never seen before. But obviously, my mum took me to 3 doctors in that year, and they all said it was just an infected boil and that my leg rashes were just from shaving, and same with the lumps under my arm, even though they were actually internal lumps, they weren't external ones. So yeah, I don't know how they thought that was from shaving.
So Olivia, what triggered your mom to take you to the doctor? What was it about this this lump or boil or bite that caused your mom to take you to the doctor?
I think because I was just talking about it a lot. It was there for quite a while, and I'm pretty sure it hurt. It's hard to remember all the way back then, but I assume there was definitely a reason why she kept taking me to different doctors. The rashes on my legs were like nothing I'd seen before until I've looked into Rocky Mountain spotted fever and rickettsia diseases and seen, yeah, that other people have had the exact same reactions.
Now, you said that you and your mom went to see several doctors at that stage in your journey. Why did you go to see so many different doctors?
I think my mum probably just felt like we weren't getting the answers that we were looking for at the time. And then I had a few other symptoms around the same time pop up to do with my mood. Like I started developing anxiety and depression. I failed one of those tests, or not failed, I was pretty high risk in the tests they do at the doctors for depression and anxiety. And I think that really worried my mum at the time. So she just wanted to get to the bottom of that.
So you had what you now know to be a very traditional appearing rickettsia rash, as well as now neurological symptoms. You went to several doctors and no one was able to diagnose you with a tick disease.
No, I definitely don't think it was even mentioned. Yeah, they don't believe in Lyme disease in Australia. The only one they do believe in is rickettsia, but still they failed to test for it or anything. The only test that they sent me for was for a staph infection, which it came back negative because it obviously wasn't that.
So now, how did your symptoms develop, and what impact did these symptoms have on your childhood?
Definitely. So yeah, the depression and anxiety took a big toll on me because I was only at the start of high school, and I guess I thought that it was because of something else. I always thought that there was something else going on. I didn't really understand what was going on really. I didn't feel like I was in control of my like feelings and thoughts as much as I used to be. I started to not attend school as much. I guess I was up late at night worrying, and I would sleep in, and then I would not want to go to school. And I think for a while my mum thought I was just being a typical teenager. But yeah, it wasn't until that lasted for a bit longer that I think we all started to worry.
Now, what type of goals were you pursuing at that time in your life, and how did these symptoms impact your pursuit of your goals?
Well, at that stage, I was only in year nine, so I didn't have too much of, I guess, goals set, but I just wanted to get through school, I suppose, so that I could go to university. I guess that was just what most kids did. So that was the goal at that stage.
So your goal was to go to university, and what was it that you were planning to study when you went to university?
At that stage, I didn't know. I didn't know at that stage. But as I went through school, I started having interest in nursing and like personal training. But I think probably when I was in year 8, I wanted to be a teacher more than anything. So a school teacher.
So now share with us how your symptoms developed from the age of 13 until the time when you were finally diagnosed at the age of 24.
I think the first symptoms, as I've already explained, were depression and anxiety, and then fatigue. And then I'd say those symptoms lingered for a while, and then I started getting really bad digestive symptoms. I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, and I never got diagnosed with food allergies, but I just felt nauseous no matter what I was eating, or if I was hungry, I felt sick. I had like a burning feeling, and then I developed reflux, and then yeah, it was a little while after that that I started getting really bad joint pain. So I went and saw a physiotherapist. And on the spot, they diagnosed me with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome because my joints were so bendy that, yeah, I could do all the things that people with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome could do. So, yeah, they on the spot diagnosed me with that and gave me some exercises to do, which never helped. After that, I actually moved to Melbourne for a little while because my dad got sick with cancer and he had a few other issues. So I moved over there and lived with my sister for a little while. And it was while I was there that I was diagnosed with all the allergy and histamine issues. I started having more issues with my digestion. I remember crying myself to sleep a few times, just in so much pain and not knowing what was wrong. And not long after that, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. I had a ultrasound and they found cysts or some sort of something on my ovaries for that.
Olivia, real quick, Olivia, you mentioned that you were diagnosed earlier on with EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Can you describe for our listeners what that is? Because we've found that it's a very common byproduct of Lyme disease where people get misdiagnosed or diagnosed with EDS before their ultimate Lyme disease diagnosis.
Yeah. So I've got, I think it's like you get stretchy skin, you get really sore joints, and they're really flexible, but not in like a like it hurts in a sore kind of pain way. Like when you move your joints, it hurts, but they stretch quite far. So I think they were the main things that I had when I was diagnosed with it, but I'm not too sure what other things.
Another thing, Olivia, is that we've noticed that you've described for us there were a lot of psychological symptoms you've had in addition to physical symptoms. And of course, you know now that these psychological symptoms are actually symptoms of Lyme disease. But were your doctors at any time thinking that your physical symptoms were just a result of psychological problems and just sort of dismissing you to the psychological realm and not addressing any sort of physical illness or bacterial infection like Lyme disease?
Yes, definitely. Majority of my issues were linked back to depression and anxiety. They didn't really ever look for anything else, no matter how many times I went to the doctor, no matter how many times, or no matter how many new doctors I saw. Yeah, they never looked into any sort of bacterial infection or insect bite or anything like that. It was always linked back to depression and anxiety causing all of my symptoms.
Olivia, how did they link the allergies back to your depression and anxiety? Because you were developing allergies for, I think, environmental allergies and also food allergies. So what were your doctors saying about these out of the blue allergies that you developed?
Uh, Nothing. They didn't look into them. I think I had one test done, which was a blood test that they test you for allergies, and it all came back fine. But I've since discovered that that's not the way to test for allergies. There's a different way, which I never went down that path of figuring it out because at the time I didn't know. But yeah, they never really had an answer for those ones. They just told me to take antihistamines every day, so I did that at the time.
So you've already mentioned that you've seen a lot of different doctors and had a lot of different symptoms, and pretty much every doctor just kind of resulted with, hey, these are all linked to your depression and anxiety because they couldn't figure out what was really wrong with you. So in total, before your Lyme diagnosis, about how many doctors do you think you had to see before you got your ultimate diagnosis?
Yeah, so between the age of my symptoms starting and yeah, last year when I found my Lyme doctor, I think there was about 50 doctors, just general practitioners that I saw in that time trying to find out what was going on. And that's not including like counselors or psychologists or chiropractors or anything like that.
Were there any other diagnoses or misdiagnoses that you had before your Lyme diagnosis that you explored with doctors?
I think majority of them I have mentioned. The only other one, yeah, the only other ones are ones that recently happened since last year.
Anything in the autoimmune world, or is that not the case for you in your journey?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed late last year with Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. Um, at first, I was diagnosed with postpartum thyroiditis. I saw about 3 doctors after having my son, and they all said that it would fix itself over time, and it never did. So when I found my Lyme literate doctor, he did the test that no other doctor does for some reason, and they found out that I had antibodies for Hashimoto's.
Now, all of these things you're describing, from our perspective, are classic Lyme disease symptoms, from the autoimmune disease to your psychological issues, to your allergies, to pretty much everything you've described. So throughout the 50 plus doctors, not one of them in Australia ever mentioned a tick disease or Lyme disease.
No, not one. And I can guarantee, even if I took my positive blood test results to a general practitioner here, they would tell me that I don't have Lyme.
So Olivia, talk to us about hormone issues that you've experienced and what role they may have played in other things that have gone on in your life.
Yep. So I think I've struggled with hormone issues probably since around I was 14. When I developed polycystic ovarian syndrome, yeah, I had really painful like cramps and everything. And after I was diagnosed with that, I went off the pill because it wasn't, I found out that it wasn't good for me and that it was probably causing some of the issues. Just trying to think. Sorry.
Right. So Olivia, we from your pre-interview questionnaire, you had mentioned that you had a miscarriage and you believe that was linked to some hormonal issues that were the cause of Lyme disease. So looking back, do you think that all of these hormone imbalances you had were just sort of a byproduct or a result of your undiagnosed Lyme?
Yes, I think they definitely had something to do with the hormone issues, like they triggered the hormone issues looking back. And yeah, when I had the miscarriage, it was because my my hormones were so out of whack, um, which was linked back to PCOS. But I think PCOS was a symptom of my body not coping with the Lyme.
And just to put this in perspective, so you were first sick when you were about 13. You're now 25, and you just got diagnosed last year when you were 24. So you struggled for about 11 years seeing all of these doctors developing all of these conditions until you got your diagnosis, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And a positive note to your story is that fast forward after your first miscarriage, you successfully had a child, I believe a baby boy, right? And he's
Yep.
about what, 1 years old now?
Yeah, he just turned 2. And yeah, so about 3 months, actually a month after my miscarriage, I decided to see a naturopath. I think you have them there, but yeah, they're a natural alternative to a doctor. And that was when I first realized how much better their testing methods were. I finally had answers for all my hormone problems. And I was put on some natural medication, and within 3 months, like I had my first normal cycle, and then I was pregnant that month, which I was told when I developed polycystic ovarian syndrome that I wouldn't be able to have kids. It was very unlikely that I'd be able to have kids. So, yeah.
And Olivia, all of this was still pre-Lyme diagnosis, correct?
Yeah.
Do you recall what these natural therapies your naturopath put you on that helped you normalize your cycle and be able to get pregnant and have a healthy young child?
Yep. One of them was to lower testosterone. I can't quite remember the name, but it was all just natural herbs that she gave to me, and yeah, they helped me more than anything ever has.
And now it seems like this is this is about 2 years ago or so that you found this naturopath and started down this path. So now that you're doing a little bit better, what led you to your Lyme diagnosis and to another doctor to get a Lyme test since you were doing a little bit better?
Yep. So after, well, obviously then I fell pregnant. So during my pregnancy, I was not too bad. I had really bad pelvis pain, probably from the joint issues, and I vomited for 20 weeks straight, but I know a lot of people get that anyway. And then, yeah, post having my son, we were both on antibiotics. So I actually got worse before I got better around this stage. So I was fine just after I'd given birth. We were both put on antibiotics after labor because I had a fever during labor. So I felt fine for about 3 weeks after that. And then not too long after that, I just started getting quite emotional again and kind of having the same sort of symptoms that I'd had in the past. And I went to quite a few doctors at that stage. They all diagnosed me with postpartum anxiety and depression. And I told them that although it felt like that, I think something else is going on. And then, yeah, not long after that, my dad passed away. So that was a hard thing to go through. And I think that was definitely a big trigger in the Lyme coming back, like my immune system probably not handling it anymore. Yeah.
Olivia, I want to explore one option with you because we recently explored this on our Instagram that there are certain medical bias where doctors will dismiss you because you're a woman potentially and dismiss it to being a mental health issue, or because it's you're hormonal and it's because of your pregnancy, or it's just an emotional problem, whereas that doesn't happen as often with men. So do you feel that your gender in the Australian healthcare system had a role in you being dismissed for so long as just being a mental health problem rather than a real physical problem caused by bacteria and tick infections?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like majority of doctors kind of, yeah, just dismissed it all because I don't know if they thought I was trying to get attention or I was, feeling lonely or something. But no one wants to be sitting in a doctor's office trying to figure out what's wrong with them because they're feeling so horrible. And yeah, I don't think doctors realize that.
Another common theme is this invisible illness component that you can feel like you're dying on the inside, yet you look so good on the outside. And we've seen your photos, obviously, from your Instagram and creating promotional content for this podcast, and you look very healthy. You look healthy, you look great. And I think that's another thing that could be misleading for doctors to see you. You look so healthy, but yet you feel so bad on the inside. Do you think that had a role as well, combined with the fact that you're young, you're a female, and they just said, there's no way she can be really sick. This has got to be a psychological issue.
Yeah, definitely. And just on that, I feel like because I did feel so horrible on the inside and I was in so much pain, that probably the only thing that made me feel better was the way I presented myself. And looking back, I definitely felt like that was something that I fixated a lot of my energy into. So I think it probably would have made me seem like I was faking it, or like I wasn't really that sick, but you know, it was what I had to do at the time to survive, and it's what got me through.
Right. And oftentimes I think this is another great example where Lyme patients get very hard on themselves and blame themselves. But really, this is a global problem where we need to have better awareness of tick diseases, and we need to have doctors be more aware to recognize these signs, especially in your case where all of your symptoms are classic neurological Lyme and regular Lyme disease symptoms. So, you know, based on that, moving forward, you know, you mentioned that now you had your child and your health started to decline, and that sort of led you up into your Lyme disease diagnosis. So can you kind of lead us up to that point where you got diagnosed and what that was like for you?
Yep. So yeah, so after I started feeling off, and then my dad passed away, I probably like hid the grieving a little bit. I just held it in and got on with it. And it wasn't until later that year we moved into our first home. We just built a new home, and we had a leak in our house. And about a month after that, we had black and white mold growing through, basically through and under the walls and on the carpet. And at this stage, I actually still didn't know what Lyme or toxic mold was, or the dangers of it. And yeah, it was after that that I got really, really sick. I pretty much didn't leave the house. I just got so sick that I started researching, and I started looking at groups on Facebook, and that was what led me to my doctor. So he's a mold doctor. He understands toxic mold and chronic inflammatory response to mold. So I went and saw him for that issue, and he did all the tests that he does for all of his patients. And that was when I did the CD57 test, and it came back at 50, which is really low, and it indicates that I was going through a chronic infection.
Olivia, can you talk more to us about the CD57 test? Because here in the United States, it's very controversial, and many doctors won't even do it because they feel no matter what, it's not a proper indicator. However, many Lyme patients have used that as a tool to ultimately lead to their Lyme diagnosis. So how is that used in Australia to lead to a diagnosis of Lyme disease or any other condition versus here in the United States where it's not really commonly used?
It's still controversial here, so most doctors won't order that test. But my doctor, he believes that it's a good indicator of if something is from a chronic infection. And in my case, it was definitely helpful part of the puzzle, because it was after that everything else kind of fell into place.
So let's explore that a little bit further. Now that you did the CD57 test, it had a result of, hey, there's definitely some sort of chronic infection going on here with Olivia. Did you get a clinical diagnosis of Lyme disease by your Lyme doctor, or was there a test issued by your mold doctor? Was there a test issued by your mold doctor to determine Lyme disease?
Yeah. So because Lyme isn't a thing in Australia, he's not even allowed to say the words Lyme. Even throughout all of my journey with him, I think I've been seeing him for 8 months now. He's just not even allowed to really bring it up because it's they've been told they can lose their license over here if they treat people with Lyme. So he had to be quite discreet about it. And I actually found out through looking up what a CD57 test is. And also when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I joined a group in Perth in Australia. And people were talking about Lyme on there being a cause of Hashimoto's. And I kind of thought, oh, that's a bit strange. And so I watched a documentary called Lyme Disease Australia, I think it is. And I actually saw my doctor on there, and I like pretty much burst into tears because watching that video, seeing everyone's experiences of Lyme and how long it took them for their diagnosis and all their symptoms along the way, it really made me feel like this is definitely what's going on for me. And I just remember crying to my fiance saying, I think I have Lyme disease. And yeah, that was what made me realize it. And then from there, that's kind of when everything started going ahead with the testing, but it was still very discreet.
So essentially, you came back with these alarming CD57 results. Your mold doctor never said Lyme, although she probably knew about it but wasn't able to say it. You did your research, came to that conclusion on your own, and then brought it back to your doctor. But we do have to ask, because here in the States, a lot of these type of doctors, naturopaths and specialists like mold doctors, are not covered by insurance. So how is that in Australia? Are these doctors considered specialists? Are they within what's covered by your insurance, or are these all out-of-pocket payments from your naturopath and now your mold doctor that you saw?
Yeah, so I'll just explain. So this doctor, he is a general practitioner, but he's called an integrative doctor. So he is covered by insurance, thankfully, but nothing else is. So he then referred me on to a naturopath, a different one to the one I'd seen previously for my hormone issues. But yeah, he referred me on to a naturopath and a homeopath. So at one point I was seeing all three of them to try and figure out what was going on, because yeah, it was kind of like they all couldn't do too much, especially the doctor. He had his hands tied. He couldn't go into it too much. So that's why he sent me to the homeopath and the naturopath.
Olivia, do you believe that you're this general practitioner who specializes in mold, and now your naturopath and your other practitioners you were seeing thought Lyme, but were fearful to even bring it up to you because of the risk of them losing their license? Because it sounds like this doctor was on one of the most popular Lyme documentaries in Australia talking about Lyme disease. You had all of the classic Lyme disease symptoms. You had the CD57 markers, yet he never even brought up Lyme disease to you.
Yeah, so because he had to use the words chronic infection, because that's just the way things are in Australia. And unfortunately for me, that came into place last year or the year before. So it was around the same time that my symptoms got really bad from the toxic mold that that they weren't allowed to even explain these things anymore. So I was kind of stuck in limbo, and yeah, he wasn't allowed to say anything, and that's why he sent me off. And the homeopath told me straight away that I have Lyme disease. So that was kind of the first time I heard it from a professional. And yeah, that was when I tested positive for the co-infections and Borrelia, which, yeah, the main one.
Now, this homeopathic doctor was after your CD57 markers and after you did the research to find Lyme on your own. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
And what testing did this homeopathic doctor do for the co-infections of Lyme and Lyme disease to get your positive diagnostic testing?
Yeah, he uses a bioresonance testing method, which I thought I wasn't so sure about to begin with, but it was amazing what it picked up. It picked up all of my diagnosis that I've had previously. It picked up allergies that I've had. It picked up the same mold that was tested in our house. It picked it up in my body. So I really believed in what he was doing. And then, yeah, it picked up all of the Lyme disease and the co-infections that I have.
So Liv, we have to share with you that the first time we heard, Rich and I, about this bioresonance testing, for me at least, it sounded so bizarre, and it was hard for me to fathom and grasp how this could be real. But we've had so many podcast guests. We mentioned that you're our 115th guest, and many of them have used bioresonance as a means of testing for Lyme and co-infections. And they've all said the same thing, that they were shocked at how accurate these tests are and how it picked up other things aside from Lyme, like you mentioned, allergies and whatever it may be, and how it really helped them get the proper diagnosis and treatment that they needed. So you're not alone in that regard. So for anybody listening, you should really explore that as an option, even if it sounds a little wacky, because we were there, but now we're firm believers in it as well, just like you. So a follow-up question to the mold is, you were exposed to mold in your home. Was anybody else that you were living with experiencing symptoms from that mold exposure, or was it just you?
Yes, so it was mainly me, but my son also, he was only 1 at the time, and yeah, we're looking into that at the moment, but he was definitely affected by it, because we were both home more than my fiance. Yeah, I think we were definitely more affected, and I also think because I have the underlying Lyme that those two don't make a good mix. So yeah, but yeah, my son was definitely affected. He was sick all the time around that stage.
So on that note, it sounds like because of your weakened immune system and just body as a whole, that you were more susceptible to the Lyme, and you were home more than your fiance, and as a result, you were sick and he was not. And you did mention that your son had some symptoms as well. So that sort of leads us to our next question of congenital Lyme, or being able to pass Lyme disease on to your child during birth. Have you researched that at all? And what are your thoughts on congenital Lyme?
Yeah, so I obviously, once I found out I had it, I didn't even think of it to begin with. I didn't think it would be possible. But I think, yeah, it was along my research journey that oh no, it was my naturopath actually, sorry. She, yeah, she brought it up. She said most people that she knows with Lyme, their whole family has it. And yeah, my heart sank because I just thought, oh my gosh, I don't want my son to go through this. And I felt bad because, I wasn't aware of it before I was pregnant. If I was aware of it, I would have made sure I did everything I could to prevent it from happening. So yeah, we are looking into that at the moment.
So let's explore further now that you finally have your diagnosis. And now it's not just Lyme, you have many co-infections as well. And I think one of them you mentioned was rickettsia, and you had classic signs of that when you were much younger, with those rashes that were dismissed as razor bumps, essentially. So now that you have this diagnosis of all of these different tick diseases, what was the plan, and who developed that plan? Was it just your homeopathic doctor? Was it your homeopathic doctor working with your naturopath and your mold doctor, who was your general practitioner? And how did you proceed?
Yeah, so my doctor knew both the homeopath and my naturopath, but they didn't work together. So once I had my results from the homeopath, and he made up some tinctures, I think they're called, to help my immune system fight off all the things that were going on. Once I had all of that, I took all of that to my naturopath, because I had had experience with naturopaths in the past, and I really like the way that they have a whole body approach. So yeah, once I took all of that to her, she looked into all of that. And then she did her own further testing, which was the dark field microscopy, which is where they take some of your blood and they look through a microscope. And yeah, it was the next time I saw her that she said, you definitely have Lyme. I can see Borrelia and rickettsia. And from there, yeah, she decided that I should do the rickettsia blood testing, because that's one blood test that they do in Australia. And that was when I got the six rickettsia positive infections. And then from that stage, I was already immune, trying to boost my immune system, because obviously they all knew that was a major part. No matter what infection I had, they knew that my immune system was really struggling, and that was, yeah, where they focused most of the attention on. And I was spending quite a lot of money on supplements and vitamins and all of that. And then, yeah, and then I think last month I took some antibiotics for the first time since being diagnosed.
Olivia, going back to your bioresonance testing, can you describe for our listeners what that's like? So, we traditionally understand what blood testing is like. We've all probably gone through that. But what is this bioresonance testing like that was used to diagnose you initially?
Yep. So at the time, I was struggling really badly neurologically. So I'll try and remember what the specifics of it. But it's a machine. It uses electrodes to um, actually I'm not too sure how to explain it. It tests something in your body. It's like a reaction in your body to the electrodes, and then from there, it connects to all these kind of tinctures, and then from that it makes up your own one, which is small parts of things that you've got, and then it helps you boost your immune system.
So essentially, it sort of tests various parts of your body to identify what support your body needs, and it uses those results from that testing to identify what you have, to then determine what proper herbal tinctures could be used to treat you at an individual level, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
Olivia, a lot of these things that you did here in the States are not covered by insurance. A lot of the testing you did, a lot of the treatments you did. So what part of your testing and treatments were actually covered by your health insurance?
Absolutely nothing except for luckily my general practitioner doctor, he is on Medicare, which is our health system in Australia. So I was lucky enough to see him through that, but I have private health insurance and nothing was covered. They took all natural remedies off private health insurance in Australia last year. So pretty much if you want to go down that natural route, you need to pay for everything up front.
If you had to estimate, and this may be a hard question and it's fine if you can't answer it, if you had to estimate how much money do you think you spent out of pocket on your Lyme treatment overall from the entirety of your illness, from the time you were young up until the present date?
Oh, yeah, it'd be quite a lot of money because all the years that I was told it was just depression and anxiety, I think I tried every single medication that there is available. And all my hormone issues, I've tried every thing that was available for that. So I would have spent quite a lot of money over those years just trying to, cover those symptoms at the time. But since things got really bad late last year, I think I would have spent roughly $5,000 just on appointments and vitamins and all that.
So now let's talk about your treatment moving forward. So once you were given these herbal tinctures to start to boost your immune system and help your body recover and fight back against the Lyme and really restore your body, what was that like for you? Talk to us what it was like the first time you took this herbal tincture and how it developed over time.
Yeah, I think because when I first started that, I was really at my lowest point, like rock bottom. I think that was when I was really, really struggling. So when I started taking the herbs, to see an improvement from them was pretty cool. Like I definitely saw an improvement in the first month of taking them, just little things. It wasn't a huge improvement, but just little things. And I didn't keep taking the tinctures because I then saw my naturopath and I just didn't want to be doing too many different things at once. But definitely immune boosting is something that's really helped me.
So you were on the tinctures for a short period of time, and within the first month, you started to see small results. Then your naturopath sort of changed your treatment protocol and you pivoted to something else. So what was next after these herbal tinctures that got you a little bit of your health back?
Diet changes, that was a huge one. When I first saw my naturopath, because of all of my symptoms and my history and all of that, she pretty much recommended I cut out majority of foods. So I was having a pretty basic diet for a little while, which I think actually added to my stress for a while, but it definitely made my other symptoms better, like my digestive symptoms, and fatigue and all of that. And even, it sounds weird, but like my neurological inflammation and my mood swings, all of that seemed to get better when I changed my diet. So yeah, I definitely think diet was a huge thing for me.
So when you went off the herbal tinctures, you primarily did a diet change with your naturopath at first. Was there anything else in parallel that you did in addition to your diet changes?
Yep. So I still I took a lot of vitamins at that point. Everything that I was deficient in, I was taking, as well as other things that my naturopath has seen work with other patients of hers. And yeah, that's all I've really done since then until I think it was about March this year that I took doxycycline for a month.
I'm going to back up a little bit before we get to the doxycycline and ask you about, you mentioned you had mood swings, and a very common thing with people with chronic Lyme disease is Lyme rage. And we didn't really learn about this until the last couple of months because many people don't want to speak about it, but it is very, very common that people with Lyme disease develop this Lyme rage, and they look back and go, say, I don't even know. It was like it wasn't even, it didn't seem like it was me. It was like sort of like an out of body experience. So did you ever experience Lyme rage? And if so, can you describe for our listeners what it was like for them?
Yeah, I definitely experienced that all through school and even after school. It was like an uncontrollable snap of rage. 1 minute you're fine, and then something sets you off, and yeah, you don't seem like yourself anymore. You get angry and you can't control your emotions, and then afterwards you just feel so upset that it's happened because you have no idea what it was. And yeah, like I mentioned before, since changing my diet, those have reduced dramatically. So I definitely think things that I was eating and causing inflammation in my brain and everything was causing them.
Olivia, can you give us specific examples of what you did with your diet, what you eliminated, and what you introduced to help your health?
Yep. So the main things that I took out of my diet was dairy, gluten, soy, and refined sugars. For a little while, I limited my meat just to see if I had the alpha gel thing. But I don't think I have that, so I've reintroduced meat. But yeah, there were even vegetables like spinach that were triggering my inflammation. Um, so things like that, I don't have spinach anymore. I have kale instead, and eggs was a big one as well. I can't have like more than 1 or 2 eggs a week. Um, but yeah, also grains. I took grains out as well.
So it's really important, and you're not the first guest to share with us that things that you generally think are healthy could make you worse, like spinach or corn, for example. And now in the second phase of your treatment, so the first phase was a short period, 1 to several months of, was it 1 month that you were on these herbal tinctures, or was it a several month period for the first phase?
Yeah, about 2 months for that.
And you mentioned you made some minor health improvements, and then you went on to your diet changes in the second phase with your naturopath. So how far would you say your health improved with these diet changes on top of the gains you've made from your herbal therapy?
Yeah, I'd say they probably helped by about 20% to begin with. I wasn't strict enough with them to begin with because I just struggled to find alternatives at the start, but it is like anything, it's a journey, and I've perfected it now. I know exactly what to eat. I still have moments where I wish that it was easier when I'm out and stuff with people when I go out to just eat whatever. But yeah, definitely because of how much it affects me when I do backtrack, I'm really strict with it now. And since I've been more strict with it, it's definitely improved.
So now that you've what I'll call step two of your healing journey, which was your diet changes, you then, what was next? Did antibiotics come next, or was there something in between your diet changes and the antibiotic therapy that you received recently?
Uh, Other than the vitamins and everything, there was nothing else before the antibiotics. But I was offered intravenous, I think that's how you say it, antibiotics at one stage before we had my rickettsia positive blood test. But I it scared me a little bit because it was 3 days in the doctor's hooked up to this thing, and I think I would have had to have a PIC line or I would have had to be injected 3 times a week, which didn't sound too appealing. So I kind of skipped that and just stuck to the natural side of things. And then that's when we got the rickettsia positive. A naturopath and doctor said that doxycycline usually works really well with rickettsia infections, so that was why we tried that.
And throughout all of these steps, Olivia, you were using supplements as well to strengthen your body. So you were kind of doing that in parallel, it sounds like, along all of these 3 steps, right?
Yeah, I was taking 20 to 30 pills a day.
Can you give us an example of what some of these supplements were? Were they just purely vitamins? Were there any herbal supplements on top of your tinctures? And which ones you feel potentially work best for you?
Yep. Probiotics worked really well. So I took a gut brain probiotic, which definitely helped. I took all vitamins that I was deficient in, which was, well, they change all the time, but B12, just all B vitamins really. Iron, vitamin D, I take quite a high dose, I think 3,000 to 4,000 IU of vitamin D, and then vitamin C, pretty much all those type of things. And then I take a lime complex and a immune supplement every day. I also take a biofilm buster, which is because Borrelia likes to hide in cyst forms, so that kind of helps. I was taking those when I was on the antibiotics to help the antibiotics actually get to the bacteria.
You mentioned that this lime complex that you took. Can you talk to us more what that actually is? That supplementation that you're doing for Lyme.
It's just a bottle, like it's just really a tablet that it's for Lyme. I'm not necessarily sure what it is, but it's for like Lyme and co-infections.
So moving forward now, you get the rickettsia positive diagnosis from the blood test, and your doctors say that generally rickettsia responds well to doxycycline. So you add in doxycycline on top of your diet changes. So talk to us what that was like when you first started taking the antibiotics.
Yeah, I actually did miss something. Sorry, I did start on thyroid medication just before the antibiotics. And that seemed to make me feel better for about 2 weeks. And then that was when I decided to do the antibiotics. So then I started those, and within a week, I was so unwell. I pretty much didn't leave the house we were all in isolation anyway, but I couldn't get off the couch most of the day. Like, I felt like a horrible mum at this stage. I was so unwell. I felt like I had like a really bad flu, but I wasn't sick. It was just from herxing. So yeah, I continued the full dose, which was 30 days. And then I called my doctor and just said, like, I've been feeling horrible. And that's when we decided to stop it for the time being.
Did any of your doctors, your naturopath, your primary care physician, or any of your doctors tell you that you could potentially feel worse when you started the antibiotics due to herxing?
Yes, my naturopath did. She definitely let me know. But I didn't think it would last like the whole month. And neither did she. So when it was lasting that long, we just decided it wasn't the right time.
So this was around March of this year, and the full month of antibiotics, you were pretty much herxing that entire time. So when did the herxing stop? And did you see any benefits from the antibiotics once the herxing subsided?
Yep. So the herxing stopped pretty much within 2 days of stopping the antibiotics, and I'd say, yeah, I did improve a little bit the week after. All my nausea went away from the herxing. I still didn't have great energy levels, but one thing I noticed was my pain was a little bit less at that stage. But then, yeah, it all came back within 2 to 3 weeks from then.
So now this is fast forward to 3 weeks after your antibiotics. So I guess we're now in around April of this year, right? what did you do when your pain came back and you were sort of having a backwards progress? What were your doctors doing with you at that point?
So they took me off all of my medication. So I went off the thyroid medication. I'd already gone off the antibiotics, and at that stage, I swapped a lot of my herbs over. I think we did some more testing on my thyroid, which seemed a little bit out still. So that's still a bit unresolved at the moment. Kind of going over that at the moment still.
So this sort of leads us up until the current date where they changed some of your medication, gave you different herbs, and now they're sort of exploring your thyroid to see what's going on there. So has there been any other changes in your treatment or your health since that time when your body pain came back? Are you still experiencing that today, or has that improved a bit?
I'm still experiencing it pretty bad. Yeah, and I'd say the fatigue and everything's still really bad. So it's definitely something that we're working on at the moment. But it's been hard with everything else going on at the moment to get to the bottom of it. But that's definitely our next plan is to see what's next after the antibiotics didn't work.
So exploring some current events, Olivia, and the impact that it can have on your health. What is it like in Australia right now with this whole COVID crisis? And do you think that this health crisis is having a negative impact on your health potentially? It's affecting your mental health or any aspect of your worry, and therefore weakening your immune system, making your symptoms worse?
Yeah, I think so. I think because there's a few things, but because we're still living in the house with the mold, even though, well, we've had it all remediated, but a house never goes back to what it was after that. So I think just being home more probably hasn't been that good for me. Even though I don't go out a lot, I don't do much, but even at one stage we just weren't even going to the shops because that they'd worried us so much about even going to the shops. So yeah, I think being home a lot and just not getting out as much into the sun and everything. And then also I think it's been hard on my mental health, just seeing people talk about how hard it is being home all the time, and then thinking like that's literally been my life for the past year, and just thinking about that.
So thinking back over your now 13-year journey, or I'm sorry, it was an 11-year journey, was there anything that helped you that you can recommend to our listeners for any of your specific Lyme symptoms? Did you do anything like CBD oil or anything that you can recommend to people to help alleviate the symptoms while they're treating your Lyme disease?
Do you mean since diagnosis or the whole?
Even the whole journey, because even before you were diagnosed, there may have been things you did that helped you feel better physically and emotionally that could help other Lymies that have a diagnosis, because ultimately those symptoms you had were likely the cause of Lyme disease, even though you didn't have it. I'm sorry, even though you didn't have the diagnosis yet.
Yeah. So I went to the gym a lot around that time because something that didn't affect me before the mold was the fatigue as much, and the pain was bad, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. So I was quite active at the gym, mainly weights and everything to strengthen the joints and relieve pain with that. I took baths, I went to the saunas, and I did all of this just to try and feel better at the time. But yeah, looking back, that would definitely help with Lyme. And now at the moment, the only thing that helps at the moment is Epsom salt baths.
So now looking forward, what are your next steps with your team of doctors? It sounds like you're still working with the 3 main doctors that have helped you. What is your plan moving forward? Do you have a plan, or are you still waiting on test results? What do you see for yourself over the next few months in your healing journey?
We want to do the testing for our whole family, the testing in Germany. I think it's the Diagnostic testing because it gives you a really thorough overview of the co-infections and everything that you have. But we're just putting that off at the moment because, like my doctor said, the treatment options in Australia won't change even if my results change. So yeah, at the moment it's just constant doctor's appointments with me and my son, just trying to I guess for him, rule out everything before we go down the path of looking into Lyme for him. And yeah, for me, it's just constantly changing vitamins, and I might eventually, yeah, try IV antibiotics.
One of the things we think is really incredible about your journey is despite you being in the middle of this long illness, both diagnostic and treatment journey, you've begun to reach out to the larger community and shared your journey. So what is it about your experience that's caused you to now want to reach out and help other people with their challenges?
Because something that got me through was other people's experiences. Obviously not hearing about them because it was horrible to read them and everything, but just knowing that I wasn't alone, knowing that it wasn't all in my head and that there are other people with similar journeys to me. I just, yeah, I want to be able to help other people with that because I don't want anyone to feel as horrible as I felt over those years.
So now you've talked with us about what has really sucked about your Lyme disease journey. Can you share with us what has been beautiful or what has changed you in a positive way since you've started this journey?
Yeah, I think it's just opened my eyes to quite a lot of things, especially in the last year or so. But it's good to understand like my body now and understand my triggers and just, I guess, taking the bad experience and making it into something good to help other people.
The last question I'm going to ask you, and it's always the last question we ask our guests, is if God forbid tomorrow you woke up and you found a tick biting your son on his leg, what would you do to make sure that he wouldn't have to go on the terrible journey that you've gone on?
Yep, so I would remove it properly. I would send the tick off for testing because in Australia, that's a better way of finding out what bacteria it had rather than testing the actual person. And then I would take him straight to our doctor and get him treatment straight away.
Tick you for listening to the Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Olivia Nicholas. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Olivia Nicholas and her tick disease journey, please visit her Instagram at LiveNaturalMumma, LiveNaturalMumma. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of the post. Third, we here at Tick Bootcamp have created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been provided to us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at www.tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. Please note we would appreciate any input or improvements you would like to offer. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify to get the automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, please take a minute to leave us a review on iTunes or on our website. Thank you for listening.